Political Analyst Bob McCarthy. We are talking about this Buffalo mayoral race. We just saw that over the weekend, former Buffalo City Court Judge James McLeod dropped out of the race. What do you make of that?
Well, I find it very significant, Kristen, because first of all, it's one less person in the field. But Judge McLeod was somebody, remember, who had won several citywide elections as a judicial candidate for Buffalo City Court. So it's not like he was unknown or anything like that. He brought something to the table, although I did not see him figuring in with some of the other major candidates this time around. So to answer your question here, I'd say one less candidate in a very crowded field, and that field will continue to winnow down.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned that McLeod has that familiarity with running in elections, but what do you think made this one different for him that said, you know what, after a month of putting myself in this race, I want to step out?
I think money and the organization needed to qualify for the ballot. In other words, he needed people to go out and circulate petitions for him to get on the ballot. That's a very difficult thing to do in freezing weather and snowstorms and zero wind chill. That's a hard thing to do at this time of the year. And whether he had that organization to go out and circulate those petitions right now, that's a major factor in anybody's decision about whether or not they stay in the race. And my guess is that was going to be a problem. Plus, raising the money that he's going to need against people like Sean Ryan and Chris Scanlon, who both have more than $500,000 each in their campaign accounts. So a lot of things are becoming reality.
Definitely. And then I know we have that Erie County Democratic Committee convention Tuesday night. They invited back 4 candidates out of the bunch of them that were interested in seeking this endorsement. What does that say about these 4 people that were invited back compared to the others?
Yeah, again, significant. These are the people who, in the eyes of the party anyway, are those who bring the most to the table, those who can probably make the ballot and raise some kind of money to be able to be competitive against the big guys, Ryan and Scanlon. Now, that doesn't mean that anybody who isn't invited or doesn't get the party endorsement will be automatically eliminated. But it's a big step forward if you can, first of all, get to the table on Tuesday, and then second of all, come out with the party nod on Saturday. That's what they all want to do. This is what they're aiming for, and there's reasons for that.
Yeah, and the party hasn't done this in almost 20 years.
I mean, they have some kind of programs, I suppose, that they've done, but this was Byron Brown's baby for all that time, and we forget what it was like before then. And for 12 years before that, Tony Masiello, and 16 years before that, Jim Griffin, although Jim Griffin was never part of the party, and to some extent Byron Brown wasn't either. But this now is a chance for the party to coalesce behind a mayoral candidate, and Jeremy Zona would love to be able to be behind a candidate, but that remains to be seen too.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about these 4 candidates here that are invited back to this convention. Let's start with State Senator Sean Ryan. What do you think there is going to happen?
He is going to be a force. Sean Ryan has gone to Albany and become his own man there. And he has been very active in a lot of causes that maybe don't come out to the forefront in the mind of the average voter, but some of the things that he's done to promote new housing programs and things like that, which are very important in the grand scheme of things right now. He's been active in kind of real nitty gritty things like that. There are many who think he is the favorite of the party organization right now.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't too many people who say that's not the case, except for Chairman Zellner, who says there's nothing preconceived, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think between what you and I have been hearing, it's definitely
it
favorite.
would be fair. That'd be fair to say that he enters this as the favorite.
Mm-hmm.
That's significant also because it shows that it's probably the will of County Executive Poland Cars also, who is viewed as very close to Chairman Zellner and very close to the party hierarchy. So that would be another thing to consider here.
And then former Buffalo Fire Commissioner Garnell Whitfield was also invited back.
Hey, here's a man who was the commissioner of the Buffalo Fire Department. So this is a guy who knows how to operate in a major post, and he had this very important public safety position, which I think is always a big important factor. And he also has been a national figure in racial tension and in things like gun control and mass shootings, because his mother died on May 14th at Tops. So he's actually been testifying before congressional committees on these kinds of things. So he brings something else to this. It's not just that he's the Buffalo Fire Commissioner, but he brings this kind of factor that gives him some credibility and some sympathy even. And so I think he'll be somebody that's important.
And inside City Hall, you have acting Mayor Chris Scanlon, who obviously is eyeing down this position to keep his administration there and keep going.
Yeah, the mayor is in a very commanding position here. You can never underestimate the power of incumbency and what that brings. He's got in his entire City Hall operation now that he didn't have before. So he's got all of these people who now work for him, some of whose jobs are dependent on him, who would be willing to work. But also Chris Scanlon comes from South Buffalo, where there is a solid base for him to start. And as solid as any base there is in the city right now. It isn't always like that, but right now I would say Chris Scanlon's political operation was instrumental in reelecting Mayor Byron Brown after his defeat in the primary. They coalesced, they got together. Remember, there's all those city employees, the police and firefighters, and all the other city employees that are based in South Buffalo that are pulling for Chris Scanlon. And it's not like he is an unfamiliar name there. His father, John Scanlon, was a key part of the Griffin administration and a well-known guy in South Buffalo in the First Ward and those places. So he brings a lot to the table here. And if he doesn't get the endorsement, well, I don't see him stepping back because of all those strengths that I just mentioned that he brings to the table. I'm
curious, you mentioned that being an incumbent in some ways can really help you out, but do you think with him being in office for, it's going to be about a year, do you think there's any disadvantages there?
There sure are. Yeah, this year especially, Chris, and you and I know both well what this budget situation is going to be.
Yes.
So the mayor in May will present a budget that's going to be out of whack by several $1 million, we know. And he's going to have to take some drastic measures. He's talking about a 10% cutback in all city departments. He's talking about raising taxes. Raising taxes? What are the opponents going to say about that? This guy is raising your taxes.
Right.
So that is a major problem. But, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, his contention is that taxes should have been raised a long time ago, that it's time to do it, and that we'll do it on an incremental basis, and in conjunction with cuts, we'll get to where we need to be. Plus, don't forget, he's been before the budget hearings in Albany and laying his case out for some type of supplemental aid in this upcoming budget. We'll see how effective he is and what kind of oomph he's got in the state capitol right now, too.
Right. And then lastly, you have Councilmember Rashid Wyatt, who was also invited.
And from the heart of the Black community, and let's not forget ever that I think the Black voters are the most loyal to the Democratic Party and are very likely to come out and vote. And so he's got a substantial base there. We talked about Chris Scanlon's base. This will be a challenge for the councilman now to see if he can mobilize that base. And we're talking about a very substantial part of the Democratic electorate here. So he brings all kinds of things, plus a knowledge of City Hall and the reputation and the relationships that so all those people we've mentioned, they bring something to the table, I think.
And ECDC wants to make an endorsement by Saturday, they said. So this is something that we're going to be watching.
They have to, because petitions
Yes.
hit the streets just a couple of days later. And that is all a result of the new election laws that took effect in 2019. And that's a result of the Democrats taking over Albany in so many ways. And one of the first things they did was change the election law to this new political calendar. And there are advantages and disadvantages of it, but it all is now aimed towards a June primary, where in the old days we'd be talking a September primary, and things would be, even right now, would be pretty laid back. But no, now the day after election, everybody's gearing up for the next day.
Right. And I know this is something we touched on, but we have an inkling that Sean Ryan might be a favorite here in terms of the endorsement. Let's say you have Whitfield, Scanlon, and Rashid that still want to run in the primary without that endorsement. What does that look like for them if they don't get this endorsement on Saturday?
Especially Scanlon, I think, is ready to go. The big question will be those other two, because they do not have the organization or the money, really the money at this point. Ryan and Scanlon are talking about $500,000 each in their campaign accounts. These other fellas are not anywhere near there. And gee, it's going to take $1 million to run a race in a city the size of Buffalo. So that's all got to be taken into account here. And again, whether they have the organization to get on the ballot. All of them, I think, probably have the resources to get on the ballot. They have enough support from where they are right now. But after that, that's when the real questions arise, and it all around money.
Mm-hmm. And after Saturday, would it be any surprise if we start seeing other candidates drop out of the race if they don't get that endorsement?
I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised. I would expect that we'll see some drop out. Maybe some of these other people think that they've got the ability to try. They're not fooling around here. This is serious stuff. The fact that even that they have announced their candidacy. So, but I would expect that after Saturday, we'll see this field winnow down even more.
Yeah. And then just overall, this is huge for the city of Buffalo. We haven't seen a new mayor in more than 20 years. The only mayor that I remember growing up was Byron Brown. I mean, this is a big change for this city.
Yeah, it is. It just for all the reasons that you pointed out, but I think people are ready for it. And any executive wears out his welcome after a while, and probably Byron Brown was on the cusp of that. He was very lucky in how he survived his last election, and he did it in a convincing fashion, but obviously he was ready to move on. And when the congressional opening did not come his way, and then OTB did come his way, well, $300,000 isn't a bad consolation prize.
Plus incentives.
Plus incentives. Yeah. So, to your point, it is a new day here. All of these candidates are looking to establish themselves as the new candidate, as the new face of Buffalo, to take the city forward. There's so many challenges that this city faces. Even the last time when there was a increase in population for the first time since 1950 census, that's in question this time because the stream of refugees has been stopped under the new administration. Not refugees, but immigrants and others that are coming here. So, some of that progress that's been noted in the past is taking a step backwards. So the new mayor has a lot to consider in one of the poorest cities in America for all of the progress that has been made. There's just so many problems, and it's a big job. It really is a big job.
It is. And then in terms of the Republican side of things, what are we hearing?
really interesting that, we reported on Friday that the Republicans are in serious discussions with James Gardner. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it's because he was the Republican candidate for district attorney against Michael Caine in the November election. James Gardner spent more than $500,000 of his own money in that race. And everybody thought he was crazy because it is a presidential year and Republicans just really countywide don't have much of a choice in a year where the vast majority of voters in Erie County are Democrats, and that's when they come out to vote. So that all played out in November, and he lost by a pretty substantial margin. But he waged a serious race, well-financed race, backed by the party race, and for the first time, the Republican Party is looking to have a serious candidate, first time in many years. There's no indication that he's going to spend that kind of money again. But the thing you have to remember about this race is that Republicans in the last mayoral race sat it out. They just sat there. They didn't do anything.
Right.
And look what happened. Byron Brown got beat in the primary, and now everybody looks at a Republican alternative, and there isn't one. And so, as it turns out, I think the party learned something that, gee, at least we ought to have somebody there. There's still a problem with this, though, and some of the old-time Republicans will point out that that's the last thing they want is an active race in the city where the vast Democratic base will turn out on November election day to the detriment of Republican candidates who are running countywide or in legislative seats. So that's always something that's in the back of their mind too. For a lot of Republicans, they just as soon sit this out. But James Gardner's a different kind of cat. He wants to be involved in this and believes he brings something to the table.
Yeah, we'll watch that closely.
Indeed. Yeah.
Anything else, Bob, that we missed
No,
about
I
this?
think gee, there's a lot there, right?
I know.
No, it just as you point out, this is a really important race in the history of the city of Buffalo. My feeling is people are engaged in it and they're looking at it, and everybody has a feeling about it, but they're looking for this first important step that takes place over the next few days with the Democratic Party interviews and endorsement. That's the first step in all of this, and that gets things rolling.
Going to be very telling.
Yeah.
And I know the primary is, 4 months out, but it's really right around the corner.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll see.
We will.